Welcome back. I don't know when you're seeing this, but I hope that after you see it, your day just gets better all the time, and you'll think that I did it. And yeah, anyway, so we're back in our series, Powerful People, and today we are talking about taking your love to its limit. And the big shift in thinking might be about the reality that we need to put limits or boundaries around our hearts so that we can keep our love on. And so that's what we're talking about today. So it's kind of a discussion on boundaries, wise limits, those kind of things. Well, let's begin by thinking about Jesus. When Jesus was on the earth, not everyone had equal access to Jesus. I know that may sound a little counterintuitive, but think about it. There was a whole world, and most of it did not know that Jesus even existed. Then you had the nation of Israel, and they knew that Jesus existed, but he didn't pop up on their radar that often. Then you had the crowds who kind of leveled up their commitment to find Jesus. And many of them saw him and heard him, but as far as actually meeting Jesus one-on-one, most of them did not get to do that. And then you had his disciples that Jesus chose. There were 12 of them. They were given more responsibility and they had more access. Then you had the three, Peter, James, and John. They got to take the trip onto the Mount of Transfiguration. They joined him for prayer his final night. They were much closer and they were given much more responsibility as well. Their commitment was deeper. And then you have John. John, who was part of the three, so he was committed. He had lots of responsibility. But when Jesus was dying on the cross, who did he give responsibility of the care of his mother to? John. So you see that even Jesus, that there were levels or ranges by which people had access to him. It's the same for you and I. We have this center of ourselves, our soul, our connection, where it's just Jesus and me. And just outside of that, you have your closest and dearest friend or your spouse. And then outside of that, you have your children and your family, your mom, dad, brothers, sisters, maybe cousins. And then outside of that, you have your friends, and they have access to you, but not as much as your children have, not as much as your spouse has. And outside of that, you have your acquaintances, people that you know of, they know of you. They have less access than friends and family and children and spouses. And then way out there, you have grizzly bears, sharks, and Al-Qaeda. They don't have very much access to you at all. You can still love them, but you wouldn't share a tent with a grizzly bear. Wisdom and all of that. So there are different levels of access that people have to our lives. Is that unbiblical? Well, that's the thing. A lot of people think that being a Christian is about just not having boundaries, that anybody who wants access to you can have access to you. But that's not true. First of all, God gave you a spouse, a close friend, some children. The way you're going to communicate love to them is through your time and attention. They therefore should get more time and attention than other people who have less access in your life. That's how you actually communicate love. If you don't communicate love, you'll communicate to them apathy and disconnection if you use all your time and energy on everyone but those closest to you. And so it is very biblical and very much modeled by Jesus that there are different places of access in our life and that people move in and out of those places of access. It's kind of fluid in there, and moving closer to you or farther from you happens as trust grows or wanes. Now, I know a lot of Christians struggle with that, and I surely understand it. But let's begin with this question. What are you worth? Let me share a scripture with you. See how very much our Father loves us, for he calls us his children, and that is what we are. Are your children valuable to you? How valuable are God's children to him? Are you one of God's children? How valuable are you? What an interesting line of thinking. If things are valuable, then they're worth protecting. Downtown Rock Springs has a couple of abandoned banks, old banks. Have you ever thought about robbing one? Have you ever thought maybe they left $1 million lying around? Never had that thought. Why? Because those banks have open access. The windows are busted, the doors are gone, replaced by plywood that can easily be replaced or easily be torn off. You know, by virtue of the fact that no one protects it, that there's nothing valuable in it. And the only people who go in that building are people who go in there to destroy or deface it. And that's kind of how we are in our lives. When we don't value our lives enough to put in some boundaries and some things that protect us, then we're communicating to people that we're not worth protecting, and we attract the kind of people who will deface and devalue our lives. We'll attract the very same kind of people that broke us in the first place. So, are you valuable? Because God says you're valuable as His child. The next question is, what is your yes worth? In Matthew 5:24, it says, Jesus went with him, speaking of Jairus, and all the people followed, crowding around him. In the story of Jesus and Jairus came and asked Jesus to help him with his daughter. When he did this, Jesus was already in the middle of a crowd of hundreds of people with needs. And Jesus is the guy who had solutions, so people always flock to the guy who has solutions, and they want that solution. But in the midst of hundreds of needs, Jairus asked and pleaded, and Jesus responded with a yes. At that moment, he began to walk through the crowd of needs to follow Jairus. All of a sudden, Jesus' yes became more important than all those needs around him. Now, I don't know if I could have done that. I mean, if I had a 100% miracle ratio going on, where everyone I touched got the miracle they needed, I'm not sure I'd ever made it to Jairus' house. I know I wouldn't have made it to the cross. How convenient would that have been for me? But Jesus knew how to say yes and mean it. So we also have to learn how to make our yes mean it. So this is another thing that we need to protect. We need to protect our own hearts and lives, time and energy and resources, because we are valuable, and we also need to protect our yes, because that is our purpose. So how are you going to do that? How are you going to protect valuable things, especially in regard to yourself? So that's where boundaries come in, because boundaries say to us that I'm going to keep in what I want to keep in. I'm going to let out what I need to let out. And I'm going to protect what's valuable in my life, my time, my resources, my relationships. How do you do that? Well, you begin by learning to require respect in your life. You see, you are God's creation. You are God's child. You should be respected, whether you feel that you should be respected or not. What is respect? Respect is, it can be spirited, it can be intense and even painful when it's honest. But it is not abusive, it's not judgmental, and it doesn't make assumptions. So first, I want to learn that I am supposed to be respected just by virtue of the fact that I'm a child of God. My behavior not connected to that. I'm to be respected. Now's the time to get rid of anger, rage, malicious behavior, slander, dirty language. Don't lie to each other, for you've stripped off your old sinful nature and all its wicked deeds. Then the next thing we need to do is I need to learn to tell you what I'm going to do. And one of the things we need to learn first off is I'm going to stay in this conversation as long as it's respectful. And when it becomes disrespectful, judgmental, assumptive, like assuming that I can read your mind or that you're trying to read mine, judgmental. I think I might have said judgmental. Anyway, if it becomes any of those things, then we move into a place of disrespect, and I'm going to leave. I'm not going to do that by my words. I'm going to do that by my actions. I'm going to let my feet take my ears and my mouth somewhere else and come back when we can do this respectfully. And you can say that all day long, but actions speak, words whisper. And so you've got to go out and do what you say you're going to do. So I don't tell you what you're going to do. That's controlling. I will tell you what I'm going to do. That's a boundary. And the last thing you need to remember is that those actions are backed up by, those words are backed up by actions. God shows you to be holy people He loves. So you must clothe yourselves with tenderhearted mercy, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. You see, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to stay in this conversation as long as it's respectful. I'm going to do this in all of my relationships. I'm going to back that up by my actions. Why? Because I'm a jerk? Because I'm selfish with my time? No, because I'm protecting our connection. I care about you. I care about this relationship. And these are the kind of things it takes to do that. I'm telling you, this is great information. I hope you'll think about it, pray about it, and I hope you'll protect the most valuable thing in your life. You. I'll talk to you soon.